It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Joe Parisi, which I think a lot of you know. Joe was director of psychology and behavioral medicine at Presbyterian Hospital for 14 years. During that time, he established the hospital's Center for Mind Body Health and later co-founded their Center for Integrative Medicine. He's maintained a private practice in Charlotte since 1979. Joe's also been meditating for over 30 years and is a long-term friend of our Sangha. Over the years, he's come and been a guest leader many times since we started, and we're just so excited to have him back again tonight. So thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. Thank you for inviting me back. I'm honored to be here, I really am. And what I'd like to talk about tonight is the role mindful listening plays in human intimacy and in emotional healing, both for others and for ourselves. And I'll leave some time at the end of my talk for some questions. So beginning first just with human intimacy, recognizing that it's one of our most basic needs, wanting to be loved and to belong. It's literally programmed into our DNA that this is something all human beings want. I think Jack Kornfield captured our need and yearning for intimacy so well in his book, A Path with Heart, which I guess probably many of you are already familiar with, when he described the rituals of the tribe in East Africa. So I'm going to just share that paragraph with you. I like to read it about once a year because it's so meaningful to me, and for those of you who are hearing it for the first time, enjoy. Jack says, there is a tribe in East Africa in which the art of true intimacy is fostered even before birth. In this tribe, the birth date of a child is not counted from the day of its physical birth, nor even the day of conception, as in other village cultures. For this tribe, the birth date comes the first time the child is a thought in its mother's mind. Aware of her intention to conceive a child with a particular father, the mother then goes off to sit alone under a tree. There she sits and listens until she can hear the song of the child that she hopes to conceive. Once she has heard it, she returns to her village and teaches it to the father so that they can sing it together as they make love, inviting the child to join them. After the child is conceived, she sings it to the baby in her womb. Then she teaches it to the old women and midwives of the village, so that throughout the labor and the miraculous moment of birth itself, the child is greeted with its song. After the birth, all the villagers learn the song of their new member and sing it to the child when it falls or hurts itself. It is sung in times of triumph or in rituals and initiations. The song becomes a part of the marriage ceremony when the child is grown, and at the end of life, his or her loved ones will gather around the deathbed and sing this song for the last time. Jack goes on to say, hearing such a story brings a yearning for such intimacy, to be held and listened to so deeply. This listening presence is at the heart of meditation and true spiritual life. And so it's that listening presence that I want to talk about tonight. When the Buddha offered his Eightfold Path as the fourth of the Noble Truths, one of the paths was called right speech. But I think actually that would have been better have been labeled right communication. Because in order to practice right speech, you also have to practice mindful or right listening. Thich Nhat Hanh says, Deep listening is at the foundation of right speech. If we cannot listen mindfully, we cannot practice right speech. No matter what we say, it will not be mindful, because we will be speaking only our own ideas and not in response to the other person. So that then brings up the question, well, what is mindful listening? What does it consist of? And I want to emphasize that I think it's really best understood as a dimension of presence rather than any particular skill set. It involves learning to listen with compassion, trying to understand the content and the emotions that the other person is saying, while demonstrating acceptance and validation of their experience. But it's really an intention we have to open our hearts to the other person as we're listening to them, trying to put ourselves in their shoes and trying to understand what their reality is like. One way to describe it is that this deep listening is not through our eyes or our ears, but we're listening with our heart. In the field of psychology and mental health, there's been extensive research over the years demonstrating the ability of mindful listening to emotionally transform and heal those parts of us that are emotionally damaged. I'm not going to go into all the research, but I will tell you about the very first study that was done in the 1950s by a psychologist whose name was Carl Rogers. And in the 1950s, there were essentially 3 camps of therapy, and they would have bitter fights. They wouldn't even talk to each other about what type of therapy was the most effective. They would just argue back and forth. And Carl decided, well, I'm going to do some research and divide folks into 3 different groups, and each one will get a different type of therapy, and we'll see which ones are the most effective. But what the research found out is that the skill sets that the therapist brought had nothing to do with how effective the therapy was. And instead, 3 conditions emerged. The first was when the therapist could demonstrate unconditional positive regard, which we might call loving kindness. And secondly, at the same time, the therapist could convey a sense of empathetic understanding. And third, that the therapist came across in an authentic and congruent fashion. That if those 3 variables were there, it didn't matter whether the therapist was practicing cognitive restructuring or behavioral interventions. When those 3 qualities were there, the unconditional positive regard, empathetic understanding, and authenticity, change occurred. I think Naomi Raymond sums up the power of mindful listening to heal in her book, Kitchen Table Wisdom. And what she says is that listening is the oldest and perhaps the most powerful tool of healing. It is often through the quality of our listening and not the wisdom of our words that we are able to effect the most profound changes in the people around us. When we listen, we offer with our attention an opportunity for wholeness. Our listening creates a sanctuary for the homeless parts within the other person, that which has been denied, unloved, devalued by themselves and by others, that which is hidden. In this culture, the soul and the heart too often go homeless. Listening creates a holy silence. When you listen generously to people, they can hear the truth in themselves. often for the first time. And in the silence of listening, you can know yourself and everyone. Eventually, you may be able to hear in everyone and beyond everyone the unseen singing softly to itself and to you. So here I want to expand the definition a little bit of mindful listening too, because so often we think of it as we're listening to someone else, we're trying to be present for them, and indeed, that's often when we are practicing mindful listening. But I would like to suggest that the practice of sitting meditation is that of mindfully listening to ourselves. That is what we are doing, because if we go back to the definition of mindfulness, okay, and think of it as having two wings, the first wing being that of coming back to the present moment, and the second wing bringing loving kindness to whatever comes up. So when we sit to meditate, we're not trying to stop our thoughts or our feelings, but rather simply be aware of them as they come up. We're focusing perhaps on the breath, and next thing we know, we're thinking of the grocery list, or we're thinking of something silly we said, or something we feel embarrassed about that we did. And the moment that we realize we are no longer focused on our breathing becomes crucial, because at that moment, it is so easy to try to push what we're feeling away, especially if we don't like it. And instead, what we want to do is to bring loving awareness to whatever is emerging. Eventually, if we practice sitting meditation long enough, every emotion we've ever had will come up. It's just a matter of time. Good ones, bad ones, neutral ones. They will all eventually emerge, and thoughts and memories will come up. And for those emotions that are difficult or painful, if we can begin to understand that these are wounded parts of ourselves, and they don't need to be beaten, they don't need to be pushed away. I think John Kabat-Zinn says this so eloquently, quote, "We need to hold spaces of darkness and horror in us with integrity and kindness, and stay at it out of some insane commitment to be whole." Unquote. I like to think of it as, can we touch with compassion and mercy those parts of us that have been wounded? We're all the walking wounded. If tomorrow morning we're hanging a picture and we, with a hammer, hit our thumb, instinctively, we just immediately grab our thumb to protect it. It's just an instinctual reaction. And that's what we want to do with the emotionally wounded parts of ourselves. If we don't take the hammer and hit our thumb a couple more times because we're angry with it, because it got in the way. We want to listen to the parts of us that need healing. I find when I'm meditating that it's sometimes helpful as soon as I realize I'm caught in an aversive emotion or a thought or a memory or whatever, or a neutral one, or it could be a positive one. As I'm returning to my breath, I'll simply whisper to myself, yes, this too. Sometimes it can be helpful to use an image in your mind, and you can use whatever image you like. The one I often use is I imagine myself, I'm in the woods by a campfire, and these memories are coming out of the forest. And I invite them to have a seat by the campfire while I come back to my breath. Sometimes I'll simply use a short phrase. Breathing in, I'm aware of the anger, or I'm aware of the fear, or the embarrassment. Breathing out, I bring my caring to my anger, anxiety, or embarrassment, whatever the feeling is. And you can substitute a verb there. Maybe it's not your caring, but maybe you say, I smile to my anger. Whatever feels right for you, I bring my compassion to my anger. And of course, you can keep developing this, all the work that's being done now with RAIN, recognizing, accepting, investigating, and then nurturing ourselves as a way of proceeding in meditation, or all ways to bring compassion to ourselves. A few final thoughts, and then I'll be quiet and field some questions, is that whether we're listening to ourselves or to others begins with an intention. And it's an intention that you'll find that we have to reset, because we'll lose it. I lose it. None of us are perfect, and we have to keep coming back and saying, well, this is my intention. At times it can be extremely difficult. If I'm meditating and I have an emotion and I'm aware I really hate this emotion, I do not like this at all, to be careful at those moments, because then we have a feeling and we have a feeling about the feeling. And we have to accept both emotions because they both are a part of us. The idea is to push neither one of them away. I had a woman come in and see me the other day, and when I was working, and she said, I can't do it. I can't love this emotion. I just hate it. And he said, well, see if you can embrace the hate, because that's a part of you. They both have a reason for being there, and see if you can understand them. When I've worked with couples, I'll often use the mantra, seek to understand before being understood. I actually have spent an entire session with couples, just where one person will say something and I'll say to the spouse, now can you repeat back what you just heard the other person say? And that spouse will say, yeah, he thinks I'm nuts. No, that wasn't quite what they were saying. And we can easily go the whole session just trying to establish a point where they can hear what the other one is saying. The wonderful thing that happens when that occurs is that you can usually see it in the other person's eyes when they finally feel understood, and they'll kind of look at you and say, yeah, that's it, you get it. And there's typically a softening. And then, and only then, are they really going to be able to hear what you have to say. So I'd like to end my talk with a short poem called Clearing. Do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is your life falls into your own cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to this world so worth of rescue. So once again, allowing yourself to get comfortable. Perhaps bringing to mind a particular person or persons that you would like to direct your energy to tonight. May I be held in the arms of compassion. May I be safe. May my pain and sorrow be eased. May I be at peace. May my friends and family be held in the arms of compassion. May they be safe. May their pain and sorrow be eased. May they be at peace. May all beings be held in the arms of compassion. May they be safe. May their pain and sorrow be eased. May they be at peace.